There's 4 days out of the calendar year that feel like Christmas morning to wrestling fans, and those are AEW pay-per-view nights. There's nothing in professional wrestling right now, in my opinion, that's as big as an AEW pay-per-view. Every single one feels important, every single one feels massive, and it helps that there's only 4 a year. But this one, All Out 2021, felt bigger than ever. This one was special, aided by the fact that AEW was on a white-hot run in the lead up to the show, and also that CM Punk made his long-awaited return to professional wrestling after 7 years in AEW leading up to this show. Interest and coverage was at an all-time high for All Elite Wrestling, and they knew that the professional wrestling world would be watching All Out 2021. And so besides the return of CM Punk to professional wrestling, AEW put together a pretty good card for this show. From top to bottom, this was a showcase of the best AEW had to offer, and expectations for AEW pay-per-views are pretty damn high. They've managed to set a very high standard for their pay-per-views. So with this being the pay-per-view that was finally outside of Daly's Place after over a year, everybody wanted to see something special, especially since it was back in Chicago where it all began. And so like I said, with a stacked card including the return of CM Punk to professional wrestling, the stage was set for a special night to celebrate the sport of professional wrestling. But as AEW tends to do, they blew all expectations out of the water, and what we got is surely the wrestling event of the year. And the best part is, I had the fortunate luck of being there live to see it in person. This is Tranquilo Club, and this is a show for the ages, All Out 2021. Disclaimer, since I was at this show live, my experience might differ to those who watch from home, and that's perfectly okay. Now with that being said, All Out 2021 was one of the best pay-per-views I've ever seen. That's right, fight me. Despite this being the AEW channel, I've never said that after I've watched an AEW pay-per-view. From top to bottom, this show over-delivered on even the highest expectations. With the exception of one match which served as a cooldown, every match on this card ranged from very good to all-time classic. Every wrestler brought their A-game, and therefore we in attendance gave the wrestlers our all as well, and that made for a recipe for a near perfect show. From the moment I sat in my seat in section 212 to watch the buy-in match, I felt the energy and the vibe from the crowd. That's when I knew we were in for a special night. So when the show opened with Miro versus Eddie Kingston for the TNT title, it made for a perfect match to get the crowd hot, and it set the tone for the rest of the night. And yes, tone and pacing will play a huge part on why this show was a home run. Kingston was over as ever, and Miro played his role of a slimy heel very well. But this was the type of match you'd expect from these two, stiff and hard-hitting. This was a fight. A very good opening match for a title that AEW has done so well in building up. Despite Eddie losing, it was a fun match to get the show started. Up next was the match between Japanese wrestling legend Satoshi Kojima and Jon Moxley. I personally really enjoyed this match, but that's because I'm a sucker for anything involving the Forbidden Door. Kojima got a great reception, which was expected. But man, let me tell you, all of you have to experience a live Jon Moxley entrance at least once in your lives. Singing Wild Thing with a crowd of over 10,000 people is an unreal feeling, and that's what I noticed right away from being at All Out Live. Everyone in attendance is there because they appreciate the product. They love AEW. This wasn't just half the arena singing in unison, it was the entire building. It's a loud, passionate, and loyal fan base, and that's what puts AEW on top. The match was a good one, a lot of fun back and forths involving lariats, strikes, and chops. Kojima and Moxley were equally supported in the building. It was no surprise when Moxley won. However, the real surprise came after the match. Kaze ni Nare hit and the crowd went wild. Minoru Suzuki arrived in AEW to confront Jon Moxley, and they went at it right away. The Murder Grandpa ended up being the one standing tall at the end, and it was a beautiful thing being a part of a crowd that sang Kaze ni Nare at the top of their lungs. A fun first surprise on a show that would feature many more, because this is AEW, where anything can happen. After this, we got the women's title match between Chris Statlander and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. Being there live for this, I noticed one thing. Statlander is over, which is great because I believe she's a future AEW Women's Champion. However, However, Britt Baker is still one of the biggest stars in the entire company, and it shows every time she makes her entrance. I honestly really enjoyed this match though. I thought both women stepped up their game. Britt in particular is known more for her character work more so than her in-ring work, but she had a good performance here. There were some fun moments like Orange Cassidy completely losing his cool and yelling at Statlander to get back in the ring, and of course the Panama Sunrise from Britt. The crowd popped huge for that. This was one of the better women's title matches on an AEW pay-per-view so far, and with Britt coming up victorious, it further added to her momentum as world champion. Great match in my opinion. Up next was the cage match for the AEW tag team titles between the Lucha Bros and the Young Bucks. One word: masterpiece. This was easily the match of the night for me. Going into this, you knew these two teams were going to do something special. They always do, but they somehow managed to outdo themselves. When the Lucha Bros made their epic entrance, it felt like I was watching this match in an arena in Mexico. Rey Fenix and Penta were over. This was their moment. It was the loudest the crowd had been up to that point. Bucks of course played the perfect heels. They even got Cero Miedo chants during their entrance, but no matter what I say about this match, I don't think anything can do it justice. In-ring work, storytelling, working the crowd, it had it all, and it was done at an elite level. This is far and away the best match I've ever seen in person. The crowd would not give up on the Lucha Bros because the Lucha Bros would not give up either. It was honestly beautiful, and I'm getting a bit emotional just talking about it again. There was a near fall in the match where I can't even recall what the move was, but the Lucha Bros kicked out and the building came unglued. I swear I felt the floor beneath me shaking. This is exactly the type of match I would rather do an in-depth analysis on because there's so much to cover. Lucha Bros getting the win and finally winning the tag titles got one of the loudest pops of the night. These two luchadores are beloved, and them winning the belts was long overdue, but the moment was made even more special by the Young Bucks' run as despicable heel champions. One of the best cage matches, one of the best tag matches, one of the best AEW matches, period. Penta celebrating with his family after the match was over was the perfect storybook ending. As a Latino, this moment will go down as one of my favorite moments in AEW history. Afterwards, we got the Women's Casino Battle Royal, and I'm glad to say that the crowd was pretty into this even after the emotionally draining cage match. Again, this might be a case where my experience was enhanced by being there live because I thought this was fun for the most part. There were some questionable eliminations like Shida going out early and Riho's awkward non-elimination, but of course the big moment in this match was the AEW debut of Ruby Soho. Before she was revealed as the Joker, the crowd was chanting her name while the countdown was happening, so I knew she was gonna get a big reaction. What I didn't expect was the whole crowd already being familiar with her theme song by Rancid. That was a pleasant surprise as we all sang along. The final two came down to Thunder Rosa and Ruby Soho, and the dueling chants for these two were loud. Either one winning would have been met positively, but in the end, it was the debuting Ruby Soho who eliminated Thunder Rosa to get the win and earn herself a future title shot. This clearly meant a lot to her, and therefore it meant a lot to the crowd as heard by their reaction. A talent who was virtually never given a real chance by others was having an entire arena of 10,000 people chanting her name and singing her song. Ruby Soho fits right into AEW, and I can't wait to see what she does next. She's a huge shot in the arm to the women's division. Next came the final fight between MJF and Chris Jericho. I missed the entrances for these two as I saw it as the perfect chance to go get merch and my ice cream bar, so I missed what apparently was a botched entrance for Chris Jericho. I got there right when the match started though, and let me say, this match was far better than I expected it to be. I should have known better though, these two are masters at working crowds. I think we all knew that Jericho was most likely winning, but that 3% of doubt is what made this intriguing. These two had us in the palm of their hands. The false finish of Aubrey not seeing Jericho's foot on the rope was the perfect touch. We got worked. The crowd went nuts when it was announced that the match was restarting. It was truly a shot of adrenaline, and this was the perfect way to get Jericho the win. MJF was caught off guard, and Jericho the veteran capitalized. A great ending to a multi-year feud as the Inner Circle came out to embrace Jericho as the crowd sang Judas. After this was the big draw of the pay-per-view, what everyone was there to see. After 7 long years, CM Punk would return to the ring to face AEW rising star Darby Allin. First off, the entrance for Darby was special as they all tend to be for his big matches. This man has insane artistic vision, which I truly appreciate. But man, the Now Arena was truly there to see the return of one of the biggest wrestling stars of the modern era, CM Punk. I'm truly grateful that I can say I was there for Punk's first match back. His entrance was euphoric. 10,000 people sang Cult of Personality at the top of their lungs. If you haven't noticed, sing-alongs are starting to become a staple in AEW. Also, Punk finally yelled those iconic words, "It's clobbering time," and the crowd did it along with him. Goosebump inducing moment. I'll say it again, Punk in AEW is Punk at home. And once again, maybe it was a live experience, but this match was a euphoric thing to experience live. The crowd was hot the entire time, roaring at every bit that Punk got offense in. Darby was no slouch either. There's a reason why he was Punk's first match back. There was a sizable portion of the audience rooting for Darby, but Punk was definitely the hometown hero. The match wasn't an in-ring masterpiece, but it didn't need to be. It was still very good in my opinion, especially for Punk's first match after 7 years. Punk looked great and Darby gave him a good fight. This is only the beginning of the return of Punk, and I think things look promising. The GTS that Punk hit to get the win was as gnarly as a GTS is ever going to look. Props to Darby for taking that. This was the right result. Darby isn't hurt by this loss at all, and that was evident by the chants he got after the match when Punk and Sting consoled him. I'm still getting used to Punk being back in wrestling because the whole thing is incredibly surreal, but man am I glad he's back. This guy is one of my all-time favorites, and I believe he still has a lot to offer to pro wrestling. A proven draw that will be a major asset for AEW moving forward. The big question is, where does Punk go now? AEW keeps us guessing in the best way possible, and I can't wait to see what's next. A great in-ring return for one of the very best in the business. Punk teasing which tunnel to go down after the match was also a fun moment. P.S. I actually like the long tights. Paul White vs QT was next, and it did exactly what it needed to do. Short cooldown match before the main event. Finally, after such a great show so far, came the main event, Kenny Omega vs Christian Cage for the AEW World title. These two had a fantastic match just a few weeks prior on the first episode of Rampage for the Impact title, so I expected this to be good. I was one of the people who was thinking that the match wouldn't main event, but with the benefit of hindsight, this had to main event. And I'm glad it did. Omega and Christian had another good match, and it was different from their first encounter. The crowd was a little tired when the match first started, but Omega and Christian, being the great workers they are, got the crowd into it early on. I don't think it was any question, Omega was winning here. The way he won was sick though. That one winged angel off the top rope was a gnarly finish and it popped the crowd huge. And then of course came the aftermath. Omega got on the mic after the match was over and proclaimed himself the very best, going as far as saying that no one is on his level. He said the only people capable of going toe to toe with him are not there, too tired, or are already dead. And then the lights went out and Adam Cole made his AEW debut with an absolute banger of a theme. This was the debut that I think no one expected until the very last minute. Hours before the show, there were rumblings that maybe Cole was showing up, but not enough to be completely confident in his arrival. But when that music hit, we lost our minds in the crowd. This man, which WWE tried their absolute hardest to keep, jumped ship to AEW. This was NXT's biggest star of the last few years. Someone who WWE, in particular Triple H, invested a lot of time in. Yet all of that was still not enough to stop him from going to the hottest promotion in the world right now, AEW. Adam Cole was welcomed by the AEW fanbase in loud fashion. Everyone was too caught up in the moment that hardly anyone noticed Cole came out of the heel tunnel, which made his reunion with the Elite obvious in hindsight. But still, it was a cool moment seeing Cole hit Jungle Boy with the super kick and embracing the Elite. We even got the recreation of this iconic photo. Also, that Adam Cole baby was deafening. Cole's promo alluded to Vince, which was funny considering he tried his hardest to keep him. Omega was about to sign off for the night, and then the opening lines to Ride of the Valkyries hit, and once again the building exploded in cheers. Bryan Danielson finally made his highly anticipated debut in AEW, and he came out to save the babyfaces and take out the Elite. One of the greatest wrestlers to ever live is in AEW. This is a man who just main evented WrestleMania a few months ago. The arrival of Danielson is enormous. Bryan showed up happy as ever and told the live crowd that he was there to see if the Elite were truly elite. The American Dragon is back. The crowd is erupting in AEW chants as the show goes off the air. This will go down as one of the very best endings for any wrestling pay-per-view ever. This will go down as one of the best wrestling pay-per-views ever. All Out 2021 is up there with the very best wrestling events I've ever seen, and it's not just me saying that. This seems to be the general consensus among fans and critics. The show instantly earned rave reviews as soon as it went off the air. The fact that the show ended with chants of AEW and not chants of Danielson, Cole, or Punk tells you everything you need to know. If you watched this show, you witnessed history. You witnessed a major moment in professional wrestling. A landscape shifting moment has just occurred, and it's been building for 3 years. All In happened 3 years ago in that very building, and it was before AEW was even a thing, but that show was just a fraction of the potential pro wrestling outside of WWE had. And I feel like at All Out 2021, it finally all came to a head. Punk, Danielson, The Elite, Moxley, Jericho. Imagine telling everyone 3 years ago that all these guys would be in one promotion selling out arenas across the country. But imagine telling them that the promotion wasn't WWE. It's insane to think about. It all started with an idea of changing the world, and that's exactly what has transpired over the last 3 years. Tony Khan has become the second most important person in professional wrestling fairly quickly. All of these big names coming into AEW credit their arrival to the promotion to Khan's passion, the passion of the fans, and the passion of the locker room. In the case of Danielson and Cole, they chose not to re-sign with WWE. They chose AEW, and it's not like they were being booked poorly by WWE either. This tells you that AEW is the place to be in wrestling right now. This is a monumental moment in professional wrestling. Not since WCW in '98 have we seen anything like this, a time with legitimate competition where top stars are choosing to jump ship. To those who don't know a time where a second major promotion in America existed, I say embrace it because these are historic times. We are living in the good days that we'll look back on and remember years from now. AEW had a show for the ages with All Out 2021. Even they themselves will have a hard time topping this one in the foreseeable future. But for now, this near perfect historic show is a feather in the cap of this 2.5-year-old wrestling promotion. Excalibur said it best during the closing moments of the show. AEW is the home of professional wrestling, and because of that, it's where pro wrestlers wanna be.